But it's important that if something comes up that's truly unexpected, it's not in their scope of work or they didn't see, to be fair with them. And that goes back to that piece of, yeah, this is a $2,000 overage, and maybe I can beat them up and say, well, we'll split it. But at the end of the day, it falls on me. If I'm making X amount of dollars more for this house, I'm reaping those rewards. So guess what? You got to take the losses too.
Welcome to the Real Estate Riches Podcast, your source for real estate investment education. Each week, we'll feature an interview with a successful investor who will share their story to help us better understand the business of real estate investing. And now, here's your host, Gabe Da Silva.
Welcome to the Real Estate Riches Podcast, guys. I'm here today with my good friend, Jeremiah Dalton, real estate investor, fix and flip guy out in Long Island. We've been masterminding together for over a year. He's doing some big things out there, and I want him to tell you guys a bit more about himself, a little bit about his origin story, and then we're going to dig into all things systematically scaling fix and flip operations. And so we're going to kick that back and forth in a pre, post, during COVID world. But before we get into it, let me just let Jeremiah tell you a little bit about himself and what he's up to out there.
All right, awesome. So thank you very much for having me on, Gabe. Greatly appreciated. So yeah, my name is Jeremiah Dalton. My company is Suffolk County House Buyers, and we are primarily a fix and flip investor throughout all of Long Island, but we cover predominantly Suffolk County. But Long Island is comprised of two counties. And I was an attorney. I graduated from law school in 2010. I bounced around to a number of different jobs. And then kind of settled in a role. I wouldn't call it an advisory role, but it was almost like an in-house role as an attorney for a union that my family was a part of, with the expectation that I was going to take what I had learned and my background within that business itself and kind of grow and help move that union forward. And ultimately, it didn't happen. I realized there was a lot of politics behind the scenes I wasn't privy to, a lot of pettiness, and just I was really I want to say subjected, but unfortunately I found myself entrenched in a really poor culture, poor leadership, and just poor people just all around. And I knew I wanted something not only different for myself, but for the people that I impacted and the people who were ultimately going to be part of my organization. So now the culture that I create within my company and the expectations that I have, we have very high standards. But by the same token, I feel like we have a very loyal group of people, because I think people who work, I don't want to say for me, but with me, know that I really care. And I may demand a lot out of them because, of course, I want what's best for the company, but I want what's best for them too. I want to see them reach their very best, which is not something that I experienced at my old job. And so, we are, fixing and flipping homes. We're one of the larger home buyers, cash buyers in our county. And, we're doing anywhere from, 30 to 50 homes a year. As this market, seems to be getting hotter and hotter, we've managed to, develop a nice niche for ourselves, in that, $300,000 to $600,000 range. And we are continuing to do that, growing into, larger price points potentially, not to the same level as you do, Gabe, but we are, getting into those upper levels. And we're just really excited for, the future and what we can bring to the marketplace.
Yeah. So I'll extract from that. One thing I know, we're both students of traction, right? It's in the background there. So kudos to you for the core values piece, for casting a vision for your team, the vision you wish had been casted for you in your past life, and then bringing that to this space and doing business that way, the right way, I would argue, and I think you would agree.
Sure.
So when you transitioned in, tell us a little bit about the momentum piece. So when you came over, your experience in real estate is limited. You're coming from the role that you were in. What did you do early on to generate momentum to get going to, where you were then to where you are now? It's been an evolution, but if you can go back, maybe give us a little bit of that.
Yeah, so I think the biggest part was building out a team and outsourcing from the very beginning, because this, company that I have now and the business that we do, I didn't leave my job and just, start from zero and build the business. I had a family to support. We lived in a nice area. I wasn't about to like kind of tear all that down in an effort to build my business. And there's a lot of people who do that. And I really respect those people who can do that. And it takes a big commitment from the people around you. But it wasn't something I was prepared to do. But I, no matter what, wanted to succeed nonetheless. So I had to build a business while I was working for somebody else. So what I did was I found ways to scale by delegating. And I would say that that's probably been my greatest strength. I'm very much willing to delegate in an effort to not overwhelm myself with a million little things, but focus on 2 to 3 big things. So, I delegated. I realized very early on that I was really in the marketing business and that I had to do, it was a blessing and a curse because in our market, you used to be able to just find discounted deals left and right. The auctions were, you could go to an auction, you could find a house, and actually there are guys who still do it. The margins are getting tighter and tighter, but I never went that route. You could find something on auction.com, you could find the bank-owned property on the MLS, whatever it is, it was easy. And so in the first couple of flips, that's what I was doing. But then it got to the point where I was like getting totally priced out. I was like, all right, this isn't making any sense. So I focused quickly on marketing. And then I kind of delegated all the other pieces. And so growing up in Staten Island, not Long Island, I didn't really know the market that well. And I realized I had to position myself with someone who I could trust, who I knew would know the market better than me. Of course, you have to do your own due diligence, but having somebody that was in the trenches was a big help. So I aligned myself with the right realtor who, was going to, give me the advice and the counsel needed so that when I sold these homes, I'm selling them for at that number or higher. And that person ultimately had become my acquisition person. And since then, he has moved on from that role and I have different people in that capacity. But I delegated that portion. So I'm at work and I'm generating leads for off-market acquisitions. And I was like, I can't answer the phone. So, I hired an answering service. Okay. And I made sure that they put, all the relevant information into it. And I was fortunate to be at a job that I did have some flexibility to look at this throughout the day, but it allowed me to not be overwhelmed. So I delegated that part. I delegated the mailing aspect to a team that knew how to mail better than I did. Okay. There was a lot of investors, they go pull a list, they write the letters themselves. Not saying you can't do that. But I still had, I was in at work at 7 a.m. I was out at 5:30 p.m. with about 3 hours of commuting tacked onto that in total. So it was a long day. So for me, I delegated the marketing. I delegated the answering of the leads. I delegated the acquisitional part where, this realtor was going on all these appointments for me and then obviously handling the sale part. So I found myself on a day-to-day basis, more or less just kind of supervising the contractors, but still using GCs. I didn't really sub a lot of things out. I relied on GCs to, handle those projects. Now, it did shrink my margins a little bit, but over time, what happened is because I was working full time, all that money I was making, I was able to reinvest into bigger and better marketing techniques, which allowed me to get bigger and deeper deals. And that's really what allowed me to scale because one, I was able to, save up a bunch of money so that when I did leave my job, I didn't really have to worry about, paying my bills. I had, a year's worth of expenses. And on top of it, I had extra money to put into the business. And I kept reinvesting that money into the business, doing different marketing techniques. And I still say this, and you could attest to this, is when you get a good enough deal, you could hire the right contractors who aren't the most expensive, but they're, certainly not the cheapest either, but they're, charging a fair price for really good work that you could leave and let them do their things. This better than anyone. No contractor really can be left unchecked, but it's just how much supervision they really need. So being able to scale was about getting the best deal that brought in the most revenue, which allowed me to reinvest that money and hire the right people that allowed me to take a step back. So when I look back and say, well, the singular thing that made a difference, it was really that marketing piece that allowed me to get the deepest discounts because it it had the biggest effect on obviously my bottom line and brought in the right people that I didn't have to be involved day to day.
That's so. I want to go there next, and we'll dig into that. Before we do, I want to unpack something you said, because I'm often a proponent of the burn the ships model, but not everybody has that luxury. You have a home, you have a family, you have insurances and cars, and there's some things that need to be paid for. If there's folks out there watching this and you're in a job, there's ways to leverage your resources while working. Make sure you can continue to keep your family fed. Do that. That's first and foremost. That's the priority. But in parallel, be outsourcing things, be acting almost as the puppeteer and having the people doing the things that, frankly, later on, you won't be able to do anyway. Your time will be better spent on other things anyway. But if you have time, the opposite of that, right? So if you do have time and you're early on in your journey, you should be doing literally everything, right? So long as how much it should cost, how long it should take. Once you have a good handle on that, immediately look to delegate and elevate to the revenue generating activities. And so you modeled for us amazing evolution, the early part of the journey, how you guys can jump in and scale, whether you're full-time or whether you're starting part-time. So there was a ton of gold in there. I suggest going back, re-listening to that part and taking detailed notes, because you just mapped it out for them. So therein lies immense value. And let's dig into where you kind of closed there with regard to, like, I think of it as controlling the pipeline and not being dependent on deal flow from like MLS or the auctions, or, so talk to us a bit about, and I know you do a lot of different things with regard to marketing, maybe why it's as critically important as it is for you to control your own deal flow, and then maybe give us what's working best for you now. And at the time of this recording, we are in month 5 or 6 of the quarantine during the COVID pandemic. So if you're catching this now, this will be very relevant to you now. And if you're catching this later, still relevant and still a ton of value, but be mindful of where we are, just time stamping this episode.
Yeah, so I mean, controlling the deal flow has been huge because it just perpetuated itself. So as more deals came in, like I said, it was producing more revenue. But more importantly, it was helping my notoriety, because as I was doing more deals and I was posting about it, like, people were finding me on social media. I mean, I just had a lunch with a gentleman, a very prominent attorney. We just sat down for lunch, and not only did he bring me a deal, he's going to fund the deal for me in its entirety. And he's giving me terms and, a structure that not many other people would get. So controlling the deal flow has, the more deals I did, 1, I got more experience. 2, I developed a loyal following from contractors who knew that, hey, this guy is really good. Yeah, he expects great work, but he's always pays. There's no problem. I gave them consistent work, which allowed them to grow their businesses. And obviously, as I said, created that loyalty factor. So having that, to me, at the end of the day, like, it's no different than like product, right? Like, I have to be able to sell these homes, and in order to make money, I have to be able to acquire the product, rehab it, and then put it back out on the open market in order to do that. So I've never had, like, as soon as I started marketing, I've never had a lull where like I didn't have stuff going on. It's only grown and grown and grown. And I have become, to a certain extent, a marketing nerd, where I'm looking at the different things and where our leads are coming from, and we're doing so many cross-marketing techniques. Like, I just get a kick out of it, finding out, like, it's almost like a treasure map. Like, where did this person like really find us from? Yeah. Like, we hit them here, we hit them here, we hit them there, and it's kind of like becomes like a little expedition. But it's interesting. You start to get into the psyche of how people find us, and I find that stuff really, really captivating. I used to find like the rehab element really captivating. And don't get me wrong, it's cool to walk into a house a month later and see the difference. But I found myself in a whole other discipline. And, getting those deals at the discounts I was able to with the pipeline, forget about the contractors, my investors too. The fact of the matter is that, like, I'm offering people, very large rates of return, and a possibility to share in the upside of that deal, because typically, we'll give a 5-month minimum, but some of our rehabs, it's not like, on yours, it's a longer period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these are, $40,000, $50,000 rehabs.
Yeah.
Some of them are longer or larger, but we're getting out of them. And, we might start a project and it might be back on the market in 6-7 weeks, and it might be sold 2 months later, and they get a 5-month minimum, and their money only might be out for 3 months. You know what I mean? So that rate of return is tremendous. So controlling that deal flow allows me to say, like, hey, like, yeah, you made a great return, but I didn't want to be that guy who's like, I don't have anything else. It's like, yeah, no, we got something. As soon as this closes, this week, next week, we got something to put you into. And they're like, oh, wow, that's great. Like, I'm getting 5 months of interest, and I got my money back in 3 months, and now I can put into another deal and potentially do that again. So, having that, it's created a loyal following. So not only are people seeing me on social and wanting to fund deals, but the people who are funding me deals are telling their friends at cocktail parties, like, we're flipping houses with this guy, he does this, and this. So a lot of the money that I've raised has kind of perpetuated itself because I've delivered. I've given more than what the average person will give. I've structured it in such a way where they get to share in the upside. And if there isn't as much upside, they're still getting a great return nonetheless. And that's all been from having the deals to support that. I mean, some of my interest rates, I'd be better off with hard money as far as, like, overall bottom line, financing costs are concerned. But I still prefer it that way because it's 100% financing, keeps my liquidity intact, and allows me to do so many deals. And again, I not being greedy, not being not trying to, I don't nickel and dime contractors. I've always looked at it through the lens and said, if I make X amount of dollars and instead I do this, I'm going to make $2,000 less. You know what I mean? Let's just say I might make 50 instead of 52,000. You know what I mean? I sit back and I really ask myself, is my life any different if that happens? And the reality is no. Even if you would have times that by 20, 30 houses, is my life really that different? No. So, but I do say, well, if I really try to beat this guy up over this number, I try to get this little edge on this investor, what could happen if I did that? You know what I mean? And then I say to myself, like, that could leave a bad taste in my mouth. So I've been fortunate, to have the foresight to understand that part of it. And I've always left people feeling like, okay, like, he's done right by me. Even my contractors who, when something goes wrong and there's a problem, I address it. And I'm very stern, especially when sloppy mistakes are made. But nobody's ever walked away feeling like, you know what, this guy got one over on me. You know what I mean? And only times is when I've had a seriously bad contractor and had to fire them off the job completely. But all the continual relationships have always been strong because of that.
I think with regard to scaling, what we talked about, and the transitions or the fluidity of how you're explaining it is so powerful because it's the sourcing of the deal, it's securing the funds for the project, it's the management of the construction with the contractors, and you outlined it beautifully. It's okay. So I need to keep the pipeline full. I have to have the deal flow. Then I have to consistently present myself in a way that aligns with my brand, my message, my investors. I'm making them whole over and over, and they become your mouthpiece in turn. And then, so now you control the pipeline, you control the deal flow. The monies are never an issue. Normally, I would say hard money is always available to you. If you can find a deal, you can find money. But look what happened early on in COVID. The first 30 to 45 days, everybody went away. So you had to have the private money partner ready to go. And we were fortunate, and I suspect you were as well, because you'd built that relationship. You'd been performing. You'd been making those guys whole, making those guys money. You want to make a friend, make him money. And so if you're making these investors money, they'll be there when you most need them. And then you alluded to the contractors scaling with you a bit. And that's the next logical progression. It's the deal, then it's the monies for the deal, then it's the managing of the trades. I like that you alluded to, like, you make those guys whole, you keep them busy. They'll work with you. Maybe talk to us a bit about what the team looks like now with the GCs and the subs. And is it all A players, or have they been with you for a long time? You don't have to go into the cautionary tale of the ones you've had to fire. Well, everybody has had to do that. And if you're watching and you haven't yet, you will at some point. Someone will wrong you, and it won't be, but it won't be, it's the exception, not the rule. So I don't want to scare people, because the reality of it is most people are out there doing good work. So tell us what the team looks like and how you guys are running those projects in parallel.
Yeah, so everything is done with GCs. There's another investor who I'm friendly with on Long Island, and he does it different. He's got a foreman that runs it, and he does it all subs. That's just what works for him, and that's totally cool. I've always wanted to have my business be as nimble as possible. I've always tried to keep the overhead low. I don't want 1 million people on payroll. You never know what we're going to happen. So, pretty much for the most part, nobody is actually, I have 2 really full-time employees. Okay. The acquisition people are my realtors. So their compensation is the listing on the back end. There's no overhead in that regard. The GCs, they get their money. They manage the project from start to finish. We could potentially start implementing a project manager to oversee all that. But at this point, that's still an element that I involve myself in, but it is something I am going to have to kind of hand off. But in terms of overseeing it, I like to, I want one guy, one price. Outside of me taking care of a few little odds and ends with some subs, the GC's giving me one number for everything. And listen, they're happy with that. They get their discounts from the Home Depot bid room. They deal with the sourcing of things. That's their problem. I have done the time and materials routine, and I just found that for the amount of work that I was doing, I had one GC, not a GC, I had one contractor that, was time and materials for everything. And he'd go to Home Depot on a Saturday, and I'd be at a fair with my kids, and I'd be getting a call from Home Depot because text to confirm wasn't working. And now I'm with my kids about to put them on a ride, and they're asking for my credit card for a $25 purchase. I was like, I am not doing it. You know what I mean? So, and that's what happened. So I was like, all right, enough's enough. I can't do that. So we've used all GCs, one price, which holds them accountable. They've got to meet a certain mark. But it's important that if something comes up that's truly unexpected, it's not in their scope of work or they didn't see, to be fair with them. And that goes back to that piece of, this is a $2,000 overage. And maybe I can beat them up and say, well, we'll split it. But at the end of the day, it falls on me. If I'm making X amount of dollars more for this house, I'm reaping those rewards. So guess what? You got to take the losses too. So having that, I think I've been able to develop good relationships. Over time, I've had certain contractors who have wanted to grow with me, and I've offered them every chance, and they grow, and I have some that don't, and they want to be a one house at a time, contractor, and that's fine. You know what I mean? And what I've kind of learned is don't force it on these guys. Offer them the opportunity. If they tell you yeah, and they don't perform, then this is what you got. One house at a guy time, and that's just the way it is. On the other side, if you keep giving them more and they keep performing, and you keep going until they can. So I think that has really been, as far as handling the contractors, how we've structured it. I'm pretty happy with that route. It doesn't mean that we won't offer support if they're getting jammed up for materials, or, one of their subs is not performing or is giving them a high price. I might say, try this guy, try that guy. And we'll support them in that regard. We have one independent guy who's a real home run. I call him the secret weapon, but he's retired. He was a former project manager for Verizon. So he handles a lot of odds and ends, goes to inspections, checks on properties for me. And it's not something I need full time. I think that's something that people don't realize, you can use, there's a lot of need right now for part-time gig work that saves you so much. So, when I was at my old job, I didn't have the time to go and check all these properties and make sure in the winter time. So I was paying people, it wasn't much, but hey, $25, go, drive 10 minutes, check in the heat, the hot water's working, no water in the basement, everything looks good. And it would cost, it would take them a half hour. And so I think in the fix and flip business, the rehab business, you can really implement a lot of that gig work without having all this overhead. The whole need for all this massive overhead just to say you have it isn't going to get you anywhere. So like I said, having my business be flexible and nimble, that's come from, giving broad responsibilities to our GCs, to our realtors, and then the little gaps, the little odds and ends, it's more like day-to-day gig work, but we don't need it every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it kept our overhead low, and it works for a lot of people.
So there are multiple approaches to scaling when it comes to the labor piece. We both subscribe to the gazelle model, right? We don't need to be big, fat, gluttonous organizations with a ton of overhead. We don't ever want to be the mouse, and that's us running it like in and out of jobs and in and out of Home Depot, those things. That's not why we got into this space. To be a true entrepreneur and someone who puts the parts and pieces in place, a gazelle, be lean, get a lot done with very little, a small team. We scaled to a place where we justified bringing on and we were talking about this before we hit record, right? We had a project manager running multiple projects in parallel. The idea there was to bank that GC premium on what were a few $1 million projects. So these are big projects with big construction budgets, and in turn, the math was done, and we said, it makes sense. Let's bring this guy on. As those projects wind down, he ultimately leaves, and we don't replace him because we're in a similar place where you are, right? We just said, hey, let's make do with a lot of gig work. Let's figure out how to get that in-between work between GCs and subs and inspections. And how many horror stories do you hear about investors whose pipes burst in the house and they don't visit the house for 30 days? They don't find out till the whole house is flooded out. So that a lot of that work, you're spot on, can be done with a couple of postings on Indeed or WiseHire. Even here locally, if you guys are watching and you've got Facebook groups for the towns in which you're doing houses, you're flipping your operations, you could just quickly post, anyone looking we're looking for a runner in town. You'll get 8-10 responses. Out of that, there's somebody there that can do the running for you, that can hit that house for you, that can take photos for you, and make sure that the stuff that needs to get done is getting done, and just spot check. And like you said, in the winters here in New Jersey and New York, we have to worry about snow, things like that. So those things don't require that you have a fully loaded employee. So thank you for that. That's super powerful. That's helping people think about the scaling. And that requires a little bit of awareness. So everybody needs to decide for themselves, like, do you actually want to be on the site? Like, are you the swinger of the hammers? Do you actually want to oversee the swinger of the hammers? Does that feed your soul in some way? And if so, you should be doing that. If it does not, and if the model that we implement makes more sense to you, then here's the blueprint.
Think about it, Gabe, right? I mean, if you got a house and, we don't have the runner there while the contractor is there, but then let's say you put the house on the market, it sells right away and it's sitting for 10 weeks during the winter, and you pay this guy $25 a week, that's $250. It's peanuts when you think about your overall profit for you to never have to go to that house ever again. Like, to me, and it works for some people, it's like a guy who lives, and for me, it made even more sense because I'm all the way on one end of my county and pretty much all of my work is east of me. So, I mean, it could take me like 2 hours to get to one of my houses. So, I have runners in different spots. So the fact that, like, some of these people who are working virtually, maybe they took a pay cut, you know what I mean? And now you're offering them little side work where literally on their lunch break or even during working hours because they're working from home and no one knows, they can go check out a house for you. You know what I mean? So I think we're primed now more than ever, especially with people working virtually, where they've got their money covered. They've got their income, but they're just looking for a couple extra bucks. It makes perfect sense. And, we've utilized that to however extent we can. We use that for our handymen, our runners, anything of that sort. And, I've utilized even realtors who they're kind of like on the upswing in their career, but, they're still waiting for those commission checks, a little bit of bonus money. You know what I mean? Hey, do me a favor, go and take some videos and we'll post them on social. Now I don't have to drive 2 hours to make a 2-minute video. You know what I mean? So just different ways that you could scale and delegate.
Perfect transition into the last piece, the find, fund, fix, and ultimately the flip piece. We've talked about the pipeline being in control of the deal flow, how to scale, how it's critical. The investors, right? making sure you do what you say what you do, you keep them happy. They grow with you as your business grows. Beautiful. Same approach to the tradesman, whether you decide that you're going to GC it, project manage it yourself, hire a GC. Again, a blueprint for those of you listening and watching to model, regardless of which approach you decide suits your business best. And then now on the flip side, how do we dispose of these finished projects? And I know you lean heavily on agent partners. So tell us what that looks like in your business.
Yeah. So going back to when I was first doing these acquisitions, right? I didn't really have the funds to pay an acquisition manager. We talked about different structures, and in the beginning, it wasn't that many deals. So to get somebody interested in this, and even the concept of like marketing to a lot of realtors are like, why would anybody sell their house at a discount? I'm like, listen, it works in other parts of the country. Let's try it here. But in the beginning, when it wasn't that many, but there was a steady stream, it was like, well, hey, would you want 1% of the purchase price? And so in the very beginning, we were like, well, we could always increase your commission on the back end. But that kind of changed, and it was like, wait a minute, like I'm giving you a lot here. Like I'm giving you a lot, and it's almost like delayed listing appointments for them, right? They're going to go, they're going to be the boots on the ground for the acquisition, but then they don't have to go back into that house again. So if you're a realtor, you've got to visit a house at least once to get the listing appointment. In my case, you're just getting it in the very beginning, and then you're just not getting that listing back for, potentially 4 or 5 months. But I kind of call them like delayed listing appointments. So having the ability to have people who are doing a lot of transactions, who are very active within the marketplace, has been a big help, because I've been able to lean on them. Like there's been houses that we've gone to, and it's like, hey, I think this number's a little tight. And they'd be like, yeah, but guess what? I just put this house down the block that's a little smaller, and we put it on the market for this, and it's bananas, and we're getting over asking. But that data hasn't hit the market yet. Right. But they're having that inside track because they're so active within our, respective areas. And so because of that, we've been able to lean on that knowledge and say, you know what, maybe pay a little bit more for this house because we see what's going on with the market. That kind of gives us a little bit of an inside track. And they're ultimately the ones that see it. They're the ones that deal with the buyers. They still work with a lot of buyers, so they know what buyers want. So I might bring them in and say, hey, what do you think here? What do you think here? And it just, you have to find the right people, but I do really respect their role within the marketplace.
If they're invaluable, we leverage an agent partner the same way. We have had the same experience. The right agent partner can take your business to the next level. They are, like you said, boots on the ground. They have the pulse of what's going on. They will bring you opportunities that they know on the outsale will generate the return that you're looking for. What my experience has been, I'm curious what yours has been with regard to the agent partners you've got. Did you have to train them, or did they come in with an understanding of what the investment side of the business looks like?
Somewhat, but there was a training element. You know what I mean? I'm more so they're there for the value. They're there for the value. What's this selling for fixed up? Yeah. That's their main objective. As time has gone on, there's been input on the rehab element. There's been things they didn't know to look for, and it was my fault for not telling them. So that part has grown. But the main part is if you're going to utilize this strategy, understand that they're not contractors. They're not going to know what things cost. Maybe they do if they have a construction background. Maybe they flip on their own. Maybe. But don't count on it. What you really want to know is, hey, so-and-so, when you list this house fixed up, what's it selling for? Hands down, this thing's under contract in 30 days, at or above that number. That's what you need. And I've been fortunate to be able to get that.
Yeah, and early on, I don't remember if this is part of your journey as well, but we went and got licensed. And then I insisted that everyone on my team, as we onboard anybody new, they go get licensed. And what I found is it still serves us in the sense that we can go on MLS, we could run comps on the acquisition side. But beyond that, we want no part of a listing. We have to trust that the agent knows best. Every time in the past where we've tried to step in and act as the representation for the sale of the property, which gets muddy in our markets because we live in the two most litigious states in the country. So in a lot of other parts of the country, this isn't an issue for folks, but still, it's just not highest and best use of your time. You run the risk of shooting yourself in the foot, especially as the owner, investor, builder, developer, whatever your role is. Even if you disclose, it's a mess. So, and the agents always wind up doing a better job if you have the right agent partner. That's been my experience. So I'm glad to hear you say that, because I know that that's counterintuitive. Like, a lot of people listening likely went and got their license and want all their own listings because they want to bank those commissions. But it's penny wise and dollar foolish.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear you agree, because I think that one really is counterintuitive, and you get a lot of pushback on that. So as we kind of wind down, I want to be respectful of your time. I think we unpacked each element of find, fund, fix, flip, and how you've scaled each one at a strategic level. Really, really powerful stuff. So thank you for that.
No problem.
To tell people where they can find you online, and then I'll just I'll hit you with our final question.
The best way to really find me is I'm active on Facebook. So you can look up my company, Suffolk County House Buyers, and you can communicate with me directly there. Suffolk County House Buyers are also active on Instagram. I get a lot of DMs through there. The other thing you could do is just find me personally on Facebook. And my email is just jeremiah@suffolkcountyhousebuyers.com. So if you're watching this, by all means, shoot me an email. And I try to respond to everyone. Pretty much, I don't think I've ever not responded. So chances are you'll find me there.
Thanks, buddy. Thank you for that. And we'll link to everything in the show notes so everybody has access to you and can see what you're up to and then follow you. I encourage you to follow their journey, and you do an amazing job of documenting. There's a lot to be gleaned from the stuff that you guys are actively doing.
Sure.
So thank you for that. So let me ask you then. So we've got folks watching that are, they're in the process, they're aspiring, or they're working to build a systematic, fix and flip operation. And what would you advise? What's your parting piece of guidance for them? What's that first initial domino you want to see them tip to generate momentum and get going if they're early on?
Get the best deal possible. I mean, go in there and try to get, and I think to me, the best way to do that is you don't have to necessarily pay to market, but do whatever you can to find that great off-market deal. I'm telling you right now, if you find a deal that, let's just say, to make numbers easy, you could buy for 100, put in 80, and sell for, let's just say, 400, right? Okay, you're all in for 180, and you're out for 400. You can get somebody to fund that deal. You could offer a private investor a 50-50 split on that deal, okay? And set expectations up front and say, hey, it's not something that I know I'm new, so I don't always want to do this, but for my first deal, let's do a 50-50 split, right? You could hire the right contractor who isn't going to be the cheapest, but you definitely, no matter what, don't want the most expensive, but someone's going to do the right thing and charge a fair price and do a great job, okay? So if you get that really great deal and you find the right person to fund that deal, okay, and you give them enough equity, and they feel as they can trust you, then you're at a point where it starts to snowball. So now you've developed an investor relationship. Now you've developed a contractor relationship. And then you look and say, well, what did I do to get that deal? I drove for dollars. I mailed. I cold called. Then you repeat that. If you keep doing that, well, guess what? It's going to snowball like it did for me. Other investors are going to tell, other people about you and what you offer. And so more money's going to come to the table. And that money's going to allow you to, do more deals, more profit you make. You could take that, reinvest it in different marketing channels. Never stop marketing. Use multiple channels, and always try to keep feeding that deal pipeline piece. And, understand there's a saying, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. So don't try to take everything. Give as much as you can. You want people to feel like, wow, I'm really getting a big part of this. And when you do that, people are just going to be drawn to you, and they're going to tell people about you. And I have no doubt that the reason I've been able to scale at the level that I have been able to was because I'm not looking for the cheapest financing. I'm looking for the best relationships. I don't look at price. I look at value. And as I said, when I pay the interest rates that I pay, I know the value in liquidity is enormous. And that's allowed us, especially during the COVID times when institutional money dried up, we don't use institutional money anymore. Yeah. Once in a while, rarely, it's all private money. You know what I mean? And it's easier. It makes it a much more fluid business. But I would rather see somebody spend 6 to 8, 9 months trying to get the best deal they can, even if it's only one deal, okay? Because then you can price it competitively and you don't have to worry about sitting on it for too long. There's just so many different factors. So spend as much time as you can trying to get the best deal possible, and then bring in the right players, and the relationships will grow from there.
Powerful parting piece of guidance. It's the first domino to tip for sure is control the deal. Once you've got the deal wrapped up, the rest falls in line. So thank you for highlighting that. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for imparting so much wisdom on us and for giving us your time, buddy. I appreciate you.
Anytime, man. Thank you for having me.
Real estate investment rock stars, congratulations on taking one more step toward real estate riches. I know that you're serious about a successful future in the real estate investment business, and the Real Estate Riches podcast is going to help you get there. Head on over to GabeDaSilva.com right now and get yourself signed up for a coaching call where Gabe will help you figure out the next step on your journey. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Real Estate Riches podcast.